Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Hayley Lloyd. Hayley is a business and authority building mentor, specializing in guiding 6- and 7-figure earners to own their authority, lead their field, and impact the world by creating unique, integrated authority that gets them seen and in demand. Hayley has gone from a corporate hustler and lead designer at some of the top tech companies in the world to a 7-figure coach in the span of only 3 years. She puts her quantum growth down to her unique way of viewing authority building, and she's now dedicated to spreading this movement across the world. Now, Hayley and I recently crossed paths in the breathwork community, and immediately we became friends. You know those people who you just instantly connect with? And what was really cool was as the weekend went on, we just started to discover more and more similarities within our stories. And that is why I am so excited for this conversation today. So without any further delay, I'd love to welcome Hayley onto the show. Hayley, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so good. And just to expand on when we first met, we literally rocked up to this breathwork event in the same outfit.
Yes.
And then gradually as the weekend progressed, we were just like, wait, are you living my life? And everything, our stories, our backgrounds, our habits, everything is just the same. And we were like, are we the same person?
Yeah. It was crazy, wasn't it? Even down to the necklaces that we had on. It was wild. I think
it was so weird.
It was beautiful as well. I was just like, sometimes when you know, I was like, okay, this person's going to be in my life for a long time. I could feel that from the outset. So
100%.
I'm so excited that, and I was like, also, we need to record a podcast episode. So here we are. I can't
100%.
wait. I'm super excited.
The stars have aligned.
So
yeah.
That's exactly right. We made it happen. So Hayley, just so that our audience can get to know a little bit about you before we dive into the interview today, let's start with some super easy questions. I want to kick it off with, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Okay, so I live in Gold Coast in Australia. I'm originally from the UK, though I moved over here about 6.5 years ago now, mainly for the weather and other reasons that we'll get into later. What I do for fun, I missed the middle question, but we'll go straight to the fun one because that's the most fun to answer. Honestly, breath work. I go on these psychedelic trips with breath work because now I'm completely sober, just like you, Ash, and anything that I can do to experience very spiritual experiences, and breathwork is an incredible way to kind of get out of the body, to experience these kind of more psychedelic experiences. I am fascinated by that stuff. So I do a lot of that work by myself, whether it's researching that, doing breath work myself. A lot of that, I spend a lot of time by the beach because it's just it's where my heart just feels alive. And in all honesty, my business is my passion as well. It's literally everything that I used to be passionate about as a child. Did you ever know the website Neopets?
Oh my gosh, yes, of course.
Okay, so I was an avid Neopetter, but I didn't do it because I wanted to have little pets. I did it because they had these sections called guilds, and the guilds were basically everyone could have one guild that they joined, and you would own a guild, or you decided to join a guild. So I decided to create my own, and then you would create all of the design for the guild, and then you would code the guild so it looked really great, and then you'd have websites on Neopets pages and stuff, and so you'd code all of them, and then you'd go onto the marketing boards, and then you would basically advertise your guild and try to get people into the guild. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but this is what I spent my entire childhood doing. I was building businesses. And I then created my first business when I was 15, and I was selling graphics and everything. So this has just been such a passion of mine for so long. So my business is just such a source of creativity for me. So whether it's designing something, I'm a designer at heart, I'm an artist at heart as well. That's the stuff that I really love to do and get stuck into.
That sounds amazing. So that kind of leads into that last question then. What does an average day look like for you?
Oh yeah, that was the question. I went straight to fun. Average day, because I'm full-time in my business. Each one could look quite different. But typically every morning I start with a devotional practice. I don't call it a routine. I find routines very draining, but I'm very spiritual. So I call it a devotional practice to spirit, which involves breathwork, affirmations, tarot, connecting to spirit, and just really setting my baseline for the day, and like removing any like anxiety, stress, or anything that's in my body or that's come up even during the night. And then it goes into work, and each day can be slightly different. So some days I have quite a lot of calls with clients. Some weeks I keep completely clear so I can just do creative work. But typically I'll have a period of time where I'm creating content for the business, and then we go into like coaching and supporting my clients, and then going into project-based work. So if we're launching a new program, or one of the programs needs updating, or we need a new sales page, I do all of that. And that's where my creativity really comes out, because I just love doing all of it. The design, the copywriting, like all of it is very, very exciting. So that's sort of my day to day. And obviously we live next to the beach, so the beach plays a very large part in my daily routine, whether it's taking my dog to the beach, or going to the beach and meditating, or taking my tarot cards, and like doing a spread on the beach, and just really sinking into like, what does this mean for me right now, and how is this trying to guide me, and just really allowing myself to like sit in nature, as opposed to like in the busyness of like my office, for example, and just really reconnecting there. So yeah, I have quite a lot of freedom with my day to day, but that's typically what it looks like.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I think it is so important, especially, I'm the same. I work from home. I have my office and my studio here, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But at the same time, it's so important to get out and be outside and be immersed in nature, and just to change the energy, because otherwise, I don't know about you, but yeah, it can become a little bit like a vortex, and like I can just keep going and going, because it is being driven from a place of passion and purpose. You can almost just get, like stuck in the vortex. So I love that you have that intention to get outside and to be by the water and to be grounded, so that you can bring that back into then the work that you do and the way that you serve others, which is beautiful. Something that you spoke to me about, I don't even know if you remember telling me a little while ago, was that you carve out, is it half days or full days for vision boarding? And that's almost like on a weekly basis. Can you tell me more about that and the intention behind that? That's amazing. It's inspiring, to be honest.
Yeah. It's something that I realized most business owners are visionaries at heart. We have like a large vision. And if we aren't taking time to nurture that vision, then often we'll become stagnant, or we'll end up doing things that don't quite feel right anymore. And I've noticed this, I work with new entrepreneurs and I work with 7-figure entrepreneurs. So this happens at every single level. If you're not at least quarterly coming back to like your vision, things can start to become stagnant. And so I realized this a while back, and there is like a magic in visioning days, and manifestation really plays like a really large part in this as well. But it all really comes down to aligned action. Like a big part of manifestation is aligned action. But the only way to create alignment is by continuing to check in, like, am I in alignment? And that's what most people don't do. They're not checking in, like, am I in alignment? They're just, I set this project, I do this project, I fulfill it, and I keep on doing the same thing. And then they get to a stage where it's just like, everything feels stagnant, something doesn't feel right. And then when you actually ask the question, what's feeling out of alignment, then they can probably give you a whole list. But like, my perspective is, why let it get to that point? And if you actually speak to a lot of really successful people have a lot of space to do this visioning. They actually count this visioning work as work. And, I know some people that have been on Forbes under 30 list, and they all have the same thing. They have like these visioning days, during their weeks or during the months or whenever it is. So for myself, I usually either on a Monday or a Friday, I will just have a day where I have no calls on either of those days. And I will just start my day with either looking at a vision board or looking at my previous intentions and just being like, where do I want to take this business? Not like, what's my tasks? There's working in the business and working on the business, and so this is like, I'm working on the business every single time I do visioning. And so I'll look at the vision and I'll be like, is this still in alignment? And I'll allow myself to do it again, and like allow that creativity to kind of reactivate, because it's so interesting how like month to month it changes. Oh, well, I actually want to be now that I tried that didn't quite work. So let's do it like this. Let's change the marketing strategy to be like this. And, I went through a really big shift actually over this past year where I changed the intention of a lot of my messaging. And that came through lots and lots of vision days of being like, okay, when am I going to pivot all of this? What's that going to look like? How can I embody more deeply into like the pivot and the shift that I want to create? And it's also the thing that allowed me to decide, okay, I want to do a breathwork facilitation course, because I felt like there was a gap for something that was coming up in my vision days. And I was like, there's that gap. And I could be very happy with all of the certifications that I currently have. I'm EFT, hypnotherapy, life coaching diploma. Like I've done so much. Yet if there's a gap that I'm feeling in my vision days, why not fill it? And so it allows you to make those kinds of decisions. And from my perspective, it just allows me to take faster action and more aligned action, which is, I think, why I can grow and move so fast, because I'm constantly allowing kind of my energy to just check in. And if you're spiritual, asking the question, am I still in alignment today? Am I acting from alignment today with spirit, with like my higher calling, with my dharma? And because it's so easy to get swept up in just like the ego says do this, the ego says do this, and then you're running, and then you get tired, and then something doesn't feel quite right. And then, when you're not in aligned action, it feels harder. It shouldn't feel like it's always going to be hard work, but there's a different tonality to when it feels hard because it's not in alignment versus it feels hard because it's a lot of work,
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
100%.
kind of what I mean by that.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly why I made the decision to bring this show back. I started my other show, and I love my other show, and it serves a purpose. There's a reason why I have that space to have those discussions, but my heart was here. And this is still a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like work because it's so aligned to my purpose and my mission. Yeah, perfect example. I love that. And so inspiring. Anybody that's listening, it doesn't matter if you're an electrician, if you are working in a cafe, like set the time to create these vision days. It doesn't even necessarily have to be related to your business. Maybe it's your life, your family, your plans to travel, see the world, whatever it is. But we have to create the intention. Otherwise, you do kind of just get swept up into the washing machine of life and, perhaps feel a bit directionless. So thank you for sharing that. I love that. And I am, straight after this call, going to plug in a visioning day into my calendar at least once a month. Yes, and I'll let you know how I go. Okay, Hayley, unreal. I'm going to keep you posted. Honey, I've asked you to bring in a photo today. This is a photo from a time in your life where you were hiding behind a smile. So you were projecting one version of yourself to the outside world, but the reality was you were struggling on the inside. Can you please describe for our listeners what this photo looks like? If you're watching along, I'll flash it up on the screen for you to see now. But for those who are perhaps listening, maybe driving, can you describe the photo? And then I'd really love for you to share what was going on for you at that time in your life.
Yeah, sure. So, by the way, can I just say I love the concept behind this podcast. I just think it's so brilliant because there's so much that can be said from a photograph. And yeah, I just think it's brilliant. So Thank you for inviting me on and letting me talk about this. So the photo that I have in front of me is one when I was living in London. I'm wearing a black trench coat with a black floppy hat, and I'm walking in Clapham. And it's a professional photography that was taken for my first iteration of my first ever coaching business, which ended up being a complete flop. Because of everything that was going on. Yeah. So I did all of the things wrong that you're not meant to do. When I started our business, I got the photo shoot, I did the branding, I made all the programs, did not build an audience because I was so self-conscious to like put myself out there. So when I launched everything, no one signed up, and I took it so personally. It was, because there was a lot of stuff going on anyway. But in this photo in particular, I had actually just come off the back of an ectopic pregnancy. And so this was actually the time, I think this was the last 2 days. There was 2 days after this photo shoot that I started drinking again. And so I already was drinking quite heavily back then. And the main reason behind that was I had 2 experiences when I was 17 and then 24 of sexual assault. And I never processed any of that stuff. And I just put it down and I blamed myself, and got into a actually a really lovely relationship, but that ended really badly. And there was a lot of betrayal and lies that came alongside it. And then I ended up, basically alone living in London. And then I had a boyfriend at the time, and I had this really, really difficult morning where I was going into work. I was actually going to break up with him that day. I was getting the train into work, and on the train coming into work, I started feeling really, really nauseous, and I started feeling really lightheaded. And this is a packed commuter train, like painting the picture here. Like imagine everyone's sardines, like everyone's in suits. Like I'm on the back row on the back seat, and I'm suddenly looking around, and I'm trying to look around for like a trash can, and I'm like, I'm going to projectile. Like, and I've never been a projectile bomber in my life. And so literally within like 5 seconds, I'm like grabbing at someone being like, where's the bag? Where's the bag? And no one found one. So I ended up like spewing through my hand and then passing out. And I passed out. And so I came round like on the tube station floor, and I was just surrounded by this like sea of people, and everyone's like, oh my god, like people like calling someone. I was like, what's happened? And they were like, you passed out on the train, are you okay? And I was like, I must have just not eaten, like I don't know. And this woman, she was like, maybe your blood sugar's low, let's go and get you some chocolate. So we went to go and got me some chocolate and everything, and I started feeling better. So I was like, you know what, it's fine, I'll go into work anyway, because I'd already just spent like an hour getting to that point. And so I went into work, and I got to work, and I started feeling these pains in my stomach, and I was like, okay, this is weird. I'm not meant to be coming on my period. So I went to the toilet, and I was like bleeding everywhere, and it was like this constant flow, and I was like, something's not right. And then the pain just became crippling, and suddenly I couldn't stand up, and I was like, what's going on here? So I called like my manager at the time, and I was like, you're gonna have to come. He's a guy, and you're gonna have to come into the women's bathroom because I can't move. And he came in, he sat with me, he was like, what do you want me to do? I was like, I think you're gonna have to call an ambulance because I can't get up right now, and I'm just bleeding, like something's wrong. And so the ambulance came to pick me up, took me into hospital, Paddington Hospital. But the problem was, if anyone knows London, it is so busy, and there are so many accidents that happen, especially in Paddington. So like I was waiting there for 7 hours, and no one came to check on me. There was just one accident after the other. And eventually this woman came to me, and she was just like, look, we are having a really unfortunate day today. Like there are so many accidents, you just keep on getting bumped down the list. So why don't you go home and just call us tomorrow if something's still wrong? I'm still in pain, but at this point, they didn't even check whether anything was wrong. So like huge neglect, like from the NHS and the services there. So eventually I was just like, you know what, fine. I'm just literally sitting in a chair. I might as well be sitting in my bed. So they just gave me some painkillers. I went home back to Clapham, which is quite a way, it was like a 40-minute taxi ride or something. And got home, went to sleep. And then I was still in pain, and I woke up the next morning, and it's this weird like female intuition that you have. And I just woke up and I was like, I'm pregnant. And it's weird because I was on birth control, like I should not have been pregnant. And so I basically called up the doctor, not even the hospital, and I was like, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm pregnant. And I took a pregnancy test, and I was pregnant. And I was just like, I've just taken this pregnancy test. I've come back pregnant. This is what happened yesterday. And his like immediacy just went up a tone. He was just like, you need to get to the hospital right now. Like, I think you're having an ectopic pregnancy. He asked me to like push on my side, and I was like, it's like agony. And he was like, you need to get to the hospital right now, because like, if this is at the point where it's going to burst, you could potentially have an hour to live. And I was like, what? Like no one had given me any guidance around that. So suddenly everything got really, really serious. And so they got an ambulance to come out, and they were like, we don't want you walking. This ambulance came, picked me up, took me back to Paddington, because that's where all of my files were. Got to Paddington, and then they found out that I'd had an ectopic pregnancy. And they first of all thought it was a miscarriage, and they blamed me for my drinking. They were just like, if you hadn't been drinking so much, you probably wouldn't have had this miscarriage. So there was about an hour where they left me there, where I was just like hating myself. I was like, I am a piece of shit. Like, what is wrong with me? Like, I shouldn't be binge drinking. I've done this to a life. Like, how dare I? Then they came back in, it was an ectopic pregnancy. And so all of that was for nothing. They didn't need to blame me. It wasn't my fault at all. And they basically said, look, you're at a stage right now where you're kind of on the cusp. It's still growing, it's still alive. But if you don't want to lose your tube, we can basically put you on complete bed rest for 2 months. You have to come in to see us twice a week for blood tests to make sure that it's dying. And then you will basically, over a period of time, it will go, but you can't drink over that period. So I decided to do that. I obviously don't want to lose a tube. And so they basically put me on bed rest. And so twice a week, I'm getting a taxi into Paddington, because that's where all my files are, to get blood tests. And for 2 months, it did not, in fact, it's still growing and I'm still in pain. So I'm just on like painkillers and everything. And by the end, you know, they basically said, the way that we get rid of this is to give you a shot of chemotherapy. And then that should terminate the pregnancy completely. But obviously they give you all of the scare, you know, you could lose your hair, you could lose this. It was such a tiny amount, but it just wasn't really communicated with me. So I had like a load of anxiety, like, oh my God, what am I getting done? So over that period though, I wasn't drinking and I had like a lot more energy. I found all of this energy. So I was like, I'm going to start a business, like whilst I'm on bed rest, you know? So I was starting this business. And ironically, I built it on like how to teach people how to market themselves and design, because that's what my background was in. And so I'm building this business on bed rest, like whilst all of this is happening, like not processing anything, didn't even think about the fact that there was a soul that was meant to be coming down to my body that was still hovering somewhere, never processed it, never looked into any of it, and just allowed it to kind of be there. So I'm setting up this business and I'm just like, everything's fine. Everything's great. What does everyone else want me to be? Like trying to decide what I wanted my look to be. And so that outfit that you see in the photo is a very procured outfit where it's like the hat. I never wear hats like that, but it's like what I thought was like cool at the time, you know?
Yeah.
And it's like, I was like, okay, it's just really important that you're like smiling loads and that you feel really happy. But the day that the woman came over to actually do these photographs, I was feeling that morning, I was experiencing so many big feelings because I couldn't numb my feelings with alcohol right then. And so it was one of those moments where I really had to like build myself up and be like, it's fine. Like, you're going to be okay. Like create this kind of false confidence. And so that smile that you see is literally me just masking all of it and just being like, all good, you know. And this probably happened about 2 weeks after the chemotherapy, the chemotherapy shot, because it did end up going. And then 2 days after that was when I started drinking again, because the pain got so bad that I was just like, I just can't handle this anymore. Like I don't know no one taught me how to handle my emotions. Like I didn't know, because I'd repressed all of this, you know, sexual trauma. I didn't know that there was anything wrong. Like if someone asked me like, do you have any trauma? I'd be like, no,
Yeah.
like absolutely not. And I wore being strong as like this badge of honor. I was just like, I'm so strong. Like my parents would always be like, we never have to, you know, look out for Hayley because she's always so strong. Like she can go through anything and she doesn't break. And so I just wore it as this badge of honor that like I could go through all of these things, this horrific breakup, these horrible things that I'd always talk about when I was drunk, because that was obviously how I was processing it.
Yep.
I could go through, you know, this ectopic pregnancy and everyone was like, wow, you're so strong. How are you still going? And I'd be like, yeah. And I was
not only how are you still going, but you're building a business on the back of it.
Like, right, exactly.
Yeah, taking it to a whole nother level.
Exactly. And I didn't realize at the time, but I do have quite an addictive personality, but I had replaced alcohol with working. So like I was just working flat out. Like I had a job that I was working in bed for, and then around the clock, if I felt any discomfort, I'd build something, you know, I'd create something, I'd do some work. And so it was another kind of like masking. But when I did get to a place where I could start drinking again, I immediately started. And then everything in the business started to slow down. The hangovers got worse, the anxiety got worse. And then I eventually got to a place where everything was ready to launch. We had the photos, we had the website, we had everything ready. Launched to no one, like no one bought, no one signed up. I obviously hadn't built an audience. And because I had all of this emotional pain, my inner authority, as we'll talk about, was so low, so crushingly low, despite having high outer authority, right? I have a good career. I've just set up this business. Like on the outside, I look like I have my shit together. But on the inside, the inner authority was just completely crumbling. And so because of that, when no one like signed up to this program, I was like, I'm a failure. People hate me. People don't want to work with me. I'm not likable. I'm not lovable. I took all of it so personally. I'm being rejected. Like, I'm a piece of shit. And so in the end, like, I think I lasted maybe a week. And then I was like, I'm done. And I decided to basically shut everything down. I shut down. I had another business as well where I was doing a design agency. And so I'd take these small boutique companies that were quite premium, and I'd help them with their marketing and their go-to-market plans and everything. And I shut that down too. And I went back to corporate because I was like, this is, at least it's like stable. I don't need to think too much. I just want to drink. That's all I want.
Yeah. So can you tell me a little bit more about your childhood? Like, at what point did little Hayley decide that she needed to be the strong one? Where do you think that came from?
Oh, that's such a good question. Let me think. You know, it's interesting because I had quite a chaotic childhood. It was quite turbulent. And, you know, my parents, love my parents, but they're chaotic. You know, it's very up down, and there was a lot of anger in the household. And so I was the firstborn, and I very quickly learned my place. And my place was, you know, in order to be heard, you have to fight. You have to fight to be heard, basically. Otherwise you get steamrolled, or you're not going to get listened to. My sister very much went in the opposite direction, and she became very passive and very silent because I took up all of the space with like fighting. And so I think there was like, instead of there being sadness, I, from a very young age, replaced it with anger. And anger is a very strong emotion. And it feels much better to be angry than it does to be anything else. And so I think growing up, I was just quite an angry child. And so instead of feeling sad about things, I'd get angry, and I'd either suppress the anger, because we also, you know, my family, anger was also shamed, like it was a bad emotion. So you just repress it. So I would just stew, and then eventually have these rage outbursts with my parents. And that was quite normal. You know, it was just like these, everyone, and you get it all out, and then you're all fine. And so I think it was kind of in that pattern that, alongside the very British culture of stiff upper lip, you don't talk about your problems. Like, you don't talk about how you're really feeling. Like, if something happens, you just get on with it and you don't talk about it. And, you know, if something happens and you move on really fast, you get praised for it. Well done. Good job. Well, it's character building, you know? And I grew up in that culture where I don't think we ever spoke about what was going on. When I could see my parents going through things, you know, and I could visibly see there was money worries, where there's, you know, something to do with the house. I walked in on some of those things, and they never had a conversation with me about what's actually going on. It was just like, close that behind doors, and then you get up the next day and you carry on like everything's normal. So I just learned that, you know, you just bottle these things up. You don't talk about it. And so you're just strong, and then you get praised for being strong, because wow, it's so impressive that you can go through this and you can hold that much and you're still functioning, because that's what I was witnessing at home.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. It was interesting though, because I'm the younger out of my brother and I, but what I found was that I needed to scream louder to be seen and heard, because he was the golden child in many ways, and he was really sporty, and our family was really sporty, and I am not sporty. And so I was like, well, how do I find my place? And so that's, you know, it came out firstly in high achieving, whether that was in my music or my academics. And then when I got to about the age of 12, 13, it just flipped into rebellion, because I was like, well, none of this is working, you know, so now I'm just going to go the complete opposite way. And maybe I'll get, and funnily enough, that's when I started to get the attention and the recognition. It wasn't for good things, but at least I was, you know, I had what I needed in that moment, which was my parents actually looking and addressing what was coming up.
Wow.
But yeah, it's like that need for validation and to be seen and heard is just so primal and so important to our development.
Yeah.
So when did alcohol come into play then? When did you first discover it, and what was your relationship like with alcohol? Because I know for me, I drank to blackout from the very first drink, but it was also quite progressive. Like it really didn't start to dig its nails in until probably the last 5 years.
Yeah, as usual, it's quite similar. So my parents were never really binge drinkers, but they drank quite a bit with like meals. So from about like 13, 14, I'm probably like sipping the top off my dad's drink or his beer, or having a very small glass of wine at the table, and that felt really adult. But I think when it really started to realize that this is something that could help me, when I went to secondary school, at primary school I'd always been like quite confident, and something happened when I went to secondary school. I know exactly what it was. There was a bullying from this guy that I was actually in love with, and it just crumbled me. Like it just absolutely crumbled me. So I lost all of my confidence, and I didn't know how to be. I didn't know how to I didn't have a voice. I just regressed into this version of myself that like no one really knew. I was just this shell of myself from that point. And when I first went to a party and someone gave me some alcohol, it was the first time that I felt confident, and I suddenly could be myself. And I was like, oh my God, I'm happy. And people would start validating, oh my God, Hayley is so much fun. She's so funny when she's drunk. Oh my God. So yeah, I started drinking to blackout really early because I was chasing that feeling. I didn't want it to stop. And often, when you drink alcohol, there's a warm glow and then it fades. I never wanted that warm glow to finish. I was like, I will chase this. But the problem is I never knew when enough was enough. And so there'd be a tipping point, and where suddenly it's just blackout, lights are out, missing pieces of time. And that was quite early on that I was starting to experience that. But I just thought it was normal because in the UK, the drinking culture is so binge drinking. It's crazy. And so yeah, binge drinking, going to the park, getting absolutely blackout, staying at someone's house. It was just so normal from about 16 probably. And then you get fake ID and you start going to pubs. And then me and my friends, we started getting to know all of the bouncers when we were about 16. So they'd let us into the pubs, or we'd go to wine bars. And I had two friends. I was quite a young developer, but I had two friends that they looked very adult. They developed very early. They had big boobs and everything. So everyone just thought that they were quite a lot older, and I just tagged along. I was just like, yeah, like 22 when I was 16. And yeah, so going along to all of these things, it was just so normal. And for a while it was fine, but I think that's then when the trauma started happening. So then 17, I had my first sexual assault. And it was when I was like on a holiday, and I didn't know how to process that. I never told my parents that it happened. It was when I was on holiday with my parents. And I also had this experience afterwards of that, where it was the people who did it told me that they filmed it and that they were going to release it.
Oh my God.
On social media. And so I was, for 3 days, my parents remember it so that I just stayed in the dark as a 17-year-old in the hotel room, refused to go on the beach because they were all on the beach and everything. And I was just in a constant state of fight or flight. And my dad made me go onto the beach to say goodbye to the beach before we left. And I just remember it was like an out of body experience. I was like watching myself walk onto the beach, and one of the main people that had like done this was walking straight towards me. They'd always whistle at me, and so they were whistling, and I'm like trying not to turn around and like run away. My dad's like holding my hand, and I'm just like shaking. My dad's like, "What's wrong?" And then this guy comes over, and he's just like, "What's up, Hayley's dad? What did Hayley get up to the other night?" And it was just like,
what?
I was just full shut down. I was like, I don't know. I blamed myself, obviously.
Yeah.
And it was just horrific. And I remember getting on the plane from that and just being in full fight or flight the entire plane journey from Barbados back to the UK. And I was like, when I land, there's going to be an article about me, and I'm not going to be able to go back to school. All my friends are going to hate me. Everyone's going to think I'm a slut. Everyone's going to think I'm this, blah, blah, blah. And none of it was my fault. I didn't give permission for any of that to happen. But that took about a year for me just to have not my first thought to be check the internet. Like has my friends found out? That was always my first thought for that entire year. And it was only after that period that it started to subside a little bit. And I was like, well, I feel like if it was going to come out, it would have come out by now. So maybe I'm safe. And it was only with time that started to ease. But then obviously the drinking then became, which I again didn't associate it with, but hiding that pain of like just numbing that pain, of numbing that anxiety, of like, and that fear, that very active fear of like, what are people going to think of me? I'm a piece of shit. I'm disgusting. I'm this, I'm that. Self-blame, this is my fault, blah, blah, blah. And then, the second assault that happened in London when I was 23 or 24, again, I blamed myself for that. And I still have a really foggy memory from that one. But again, I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't want to be blamed for it. I didn't want, because I was drunk, so I was pretty sure that people would be like, we shouldn't have got so drunk. You shouldn't have done this. And it's like, now I know better to be like, no, that just should not have happened. Consent is consent. And I was passed out and, woke up with someone on top of me. Like that's not my fault. But obviously when you're around that, you don't understand that. And so I just, again, suppressed it and was like, this is my fault. I should know better. I should do this, blah, blah, blah. Obviously not having anyone to talk about it with. And, I even went down because my flatmate was in at the time when it happened. And about 3 a.m, I ran into his room screaming and crying, being like, this just happened, help me get this person out. And he helped me get it out. And we never spoke about it again. Wow. We just brushed it underneath the rug like it never happened. And so I think there was one specific moment where I actually made a decision to become an alcoholic. And it's so interesting. I went to this pub after the ectopic pregnancy had passed. And I went to the pub and I was with a couple of friends, and I just had this kind of like mini breakup with this guy that I was seeing. And all of those negative self-thoughts started coming back up. My head was just so crowded with like, no one likes you, you're ugly, you're fat, you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough, like you're a piece of shit, like you're stupid, all of that. And it was so loud. And everyone wanted to go home maybe about 11 p.m. and I wasn't drunk enough yet. And I was like, I'm not blackout yet. Like I can't go home because I'm not numb. And ended up going back home anyway. And I remember getting in to my bedroom, and the pain that I felt, because I was kind of drunk, but I was like not blackout. So it just enhanced all of the pain that I was feeling. It didn't numb it. It just made it worse. And so it was suddenly like the pain was like all encompassing. And I ended up curling up into a ball on my side, on my floor, and just rocking and just sobbing and just not knowing what to do with this pain, just being like, I make a commitment to myself. I will never allow myself to feel this amount of pain again. And that was when the full dependency started on alcohol. And that was the descent.
Far out. My God, just as you were describing that, honey, like I just so remember being in that exact same position and that feeling. And it's like you would just give anything for it to stop. And the inner critic, like that noise, and just how loud and constant, it's pervasive, and it's like, that's just the desperation to have peace, that's that yearning.
So did you have a moment like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, many, 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 many moments like that. And it wasn't until, but by the time I made the decision to get sober, for me, it was really, there was a paradigm shift where I went from blaming to having full acceptance that I was the driver behind the addiction. because,
Yeah.
you know, as long as I continued blaming everyone around me, I was handing my power over to them, and I was then powerless, and I
Totally.
had no way to change it. And it was like that moment when I realized, hang on a minute, I can't blame everyone for this. If I want to change this, I actually have to take accountability for it. And even though it was
Mm-hmm.
terrifying, because I knew I was opening myself up to actually probably a lot more pain, I knew that there was going to be a period where I had to learn how to sit with myself without something to numb the edges. But the pain
Mm-hmm.
of that, I knew couldn't be any greater than the pain that I was already existing in, because the alcohol had stopped
Yeah.
working by the time I got to that point. So
Yes.
let's talk about then,
So
like,
true.
our sobriety dates are pretty much almost, you know, within 6 weeks
I
of each
know.
other, which is another insane
It's
similarity. So you
wild.
got sober at the start of 2020. Tell me, what was
Yep.
the
Yep.
catalyst?
So I had been on and off trying to get sober for about a year. Um,
Mm,
and, you know, by that point, it was, you know, during the week, sorry, getting blackout on like a Wednesday and Thursday, waking up on the bathroom floor and throwing up, you know, and then going to work the next day. And it's like,
yeah.
it was just, I couldn't do anything without it. I had no personality without it. I was completely, you know, going into work and giving a presentation, having a shot before, you know, um, just not being able to function without it. And so, but for a year as well, my anxiety was so bad. Like whenever it got to like a real blackout, which would happen like a couple of times a week, the anxiety that
Mm,
I'd experience on the next day would be crushing. Like, what did I do? Who did I
crippling.
offend? Am I in a fight? Like, what have I done? You know, what were my moves? Have I offended? Have I done something that's illegal? Like, you know, your mind like
Yeah.
races. And it got to a stage where I was just like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. And like, I'm
Mm,
doing it out of habit, and I'm doing it because it's what I know, but like it's causing me so much pain. And so I tried to
mm.
moderate, you know, the classic story of like, I tried really hard to be like, I'm just going to have one. I'll just go out and have one. And I'll just moderate and I'll just cut back. Didn't work for me. As soon as I have a sip,
Mm-mm.
it's blackout time. Like there is just no in
Mhm.
between, because I chase the feeling, you know, because I love the initial feeling, and it's just so painful to go through. So eventually I, by that point, met my now partner, and he also had, you know, we both had a bit of a drinking and a drug problem. So I also had a drug
Mm.
issue. Um, and we had tried to get on and off sober for the past like 9 months. And we went to New Zealand for New Year's, and we got in a really terrible fight. Like
Mm.
it was just terrible. Like I would not want to watch that on my, you know, when I pass away, if I get like the highlight reel, I really hope I don't have to watch it again, because it was
You can leave that off.
horrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, just Control Alt Delete, please. um and so we both basically made a decision. We were like, we either, if we want to stay together, we can't stay together and drink. Like we just can't, because
Mm.
we're destroying each other, and we're fighting like really bad fights like every single week, and it was exhausting. And so we made a
Mm.
decision. We were like, do we want to try to give up together? And we both decided, yeah, you know what? We love each other enough that we're going to give it a go. And so we decided on New Year's Day, flying back to Sydney, we're never drinking again. Well, actually, that's not true. We
Wow.
didn't say that. We said we're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how it goes, and that was actually how we did it, because we didn't lock ourselves
Yeah.
into never again. We locked ourselves into let's do 2 weeks and see how we go. Let's do another week, and then by the time it's a year, it's like, okay, well, let's see if we can do another 6 months. And so we allowed that to like
Yeah.
keep on rolling. But I didn't know that, you know, it would be I never drink again, which is now what I feel resolute in saying.
That is so incredible that you could do it together. And like what it blows me away, you know, like for me, my partner doesn't drink as well, and the quality of the relationship that we have is just far beyond anything that I've ever experienced before. And I think that so
Yeah.
often relationships fall apart because of alcohol. And yet if you were to remove the alcohol, like everything just gets so much better. It's not just the fights, it's the moods, it's
So
the
much better.
connection piece. It's like, yeah, like, and I know because of our conversations
Yeah.
we've had, but like your relationship now is incredible, right?
Oh, it's honestly I can't believe that this is the relationship that I get to have. Like, we had a very
Yeah.
painful 3 years to start with. And like,
Mm.
I will say when we quit drinking alcohol, it was not smooth sailing, just as you were saying before. Like, both of our anxieties got 10 times worse. My
Mm-hmm.
um PTSD, and this was actually when I stopped drinking, was when all of the memories of the sexual assaults actually came up because I wasn't numbing them anymore. And so it was actually then that I started getting active PTSD symptoms and like flashbacks that would keep me up at night and like during the day, thinking I was in a different situation, thinking I was in a different, like, that something terrible was going to happen. So it was only when I stopped drinking that it gave space for all of these wounds to come up, and that's when the healing really started. So it definitely wasn't easy. And even when we stopped drinking, we actually still had another 2 years, which were really, really hard, because we
Mm.
basically held up a mirror to each other and we were each other's
Mm-hmm.
biggest wounds. And so we had to consistently ask, like, is this worth us continuing to fight for? And there was many moments where we were like, there was 3 moments where we were almost like, actually, I don't know whether it is.
Mm.
But then it would take us to a breaking point and we'd be like, no, okay, let's do something else. Let's do something radical, whether it was going to like this, we called it sex camp, but it was actually just like this weekend retreat
I
where
love that.
it was like, we were like, let's go to sex camp, where it like
Let's go to
teaches you how
sex
to
camp,
communicate
honey.
with each other. Yeah. And
How
that
beautiful.
changed our relationship, actually. It really did. But we both basically made the decision that, we had a lot of, I would say that I, from alcohol, as you'll probably know, like developed a lot of very narcissistic tendencies that
Mm.
needed to be healed. And I wasn't a narcissist, but I did have manipulative qualities. My traumas were so active that everything was so big, and everything was about almost protecting my wounds, but you do that in often quite a manipulative way. And so alcoholism
Mm.
and drug addiction, it can create a lot of narcissistic qualities that can actually be healed.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think me and
Mm.
my partner, we're now really, really proud of the fact that we've done so much honest work, so much shadow work on this stuff, on like healing all of those parts. And now there's none of those traits in our relationship now. And it is the most harmonious, peaceful, loving, great sex, incredible banter, incredible support, like both our own
Mm.
identities, not just one identity. Like, we have our own lives as well.
Yes.
Like, we've just
Yes.
created something incredibly beautiful. And just to talk on that, things really do get better. I used to always have this thought when I was drinking of like, well, how would we have fun? Like, my hobby is
Oh,
drinking. Like, how would we have fun if we're not drinking? And
that was like the
what's
number
so
one reason I
interesting is
didn't want to give
now,
up.
100%. But what I've realized since then is that's all anxiety. And like, when you actually heal these anxieties, you then heal the part of you that can have fun and can be herself and
Mm-hmm.
can almost act drunk without alcohol. Like, I went back to my hometown this past summer, just gone, and there were all of these like big parties and regattas, and like all of my friends and my family still like drink big time, like blackout level, and I was just like, in for the no one knew that I wasn't drinking. I'm just having
Mm.
non-alcoholics, and I'm dancing, like, I'm able to be myself. I'm being loud, like, I don't care what people think. No one had any idea that I wasn't drinking because I was on the same level. I was having so much fun. But previously, I wouldn't have
Mm.
allowed myself to do that sober, because I would have been so self-conscious of what's everyone thinking, what's everyone going to think of me. And it's like, when you heal that anxiety, it's just not an issue anymore. And so you can have more fun,
Yeah.
you can experience more pleasure, you can experience more of everything, but you've got to heal those
Yeah.
anxieties first.
100%. Like, alcohol is such a disconnector and it's such a numbing agent. And it's really funny that when you're in the throes of it, you think it's the thing that allows you to connect deeper and to not be socially anxious. But it's actually keeping you disconnected on this really deep intrinsic level. And when you remove that and you get through, like you said, the anxiety, and you start to feel comfortable showing up as your authentic self, the experiences, the richness, the color of life that you get to be embraced by is so much more powerful than anything I ever experienced when I was drinking.
Yeah. 100%. Me too. And it's just, it's a different kind of feeling. now that I'm spiritual and I understand, because this also giving up alcohol, it completely initiated me into a spiritual path. You know, I
So
found
I wanted to
spirit
ask
and
you about
the
that.
universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that happened in
And
sobriety, did it?
it did, yeah. Probably about a month after sobriety. And what's really
Mm.
interesting is like when I was a child, up until about 16, I used to have incredibly vivid dreams, incredibly vivid dreams. And it was like I was visiting different places and I was astral traveling. You know, my soul would leave my body and I could remember everything, like down to like what color thread count someone's stitching was on their like blazer or something. I could remember everything. And my parent would always become this running joke in my family of like, oh, what dream did you have last night, Hayley? Where did you travel to? But the problem was when I had bad dreams, they were really bad. And
Mm.
they would like scar me, you know. And my parents they got me dream catchers to try to capture the dreams because it would become such like a thing. They eventually said like, maybe we need to take you to the doctors. And so about 16 came around, which I've now learned is about the age where you either ramp up your spiritual gifts or suppress them. So 16 came around and I stopped dreaming, just completely stopped dreaming. And so I didn't have dreams whilst I was an alcoholic. I didn't have dreams up until I gave up drinking. And then I started, you know, just being, when I became sober, I started just getting all of these little pulls of like, maybe we should, you know, explore this a little bit, like spirit guides and everything, start doing these meditations. And my dreams started coming back, but not necessarily in a good way. I started getting actually sleep paralysis. And I was being
Oh my
visited
goodness.
by like entities. And it was like in the night, I was like paralyzed and there'd be something in the room that was like coming towards me. Or like, you know, I'd wake up
Wow.
from a nap and there'd be I would be asleep, half asleep, and there'd be something in the room and it would come over, it would kiss my cheek, and I thought it was Tom because it was literally there. It was like a manifestation of someone and it came over and kissed my cheek. And so I,
Oh,
you know, then
wow.
got up and I was like, Tom, where are you? He's not in the flat. So I called him up. I'm like, why did you just leave without saying goodbye? He's like, Hayley, I've not been in the flat for 6 hours. And I was like, what? Someone was just here. So I'm like looking through all the cupboards, like
Oh.
lots of stuff like that started happening. And so that's when I eventually got so extreme that I was like, I need to talk to a psychic. And she was like, your spiritual gifts are starting to come back online now that you're not drinking, because, you know, drinking also numbs everything. And since then I've done like shamanic practitioner trainings that requires you to like connect with spirit, and like alcohol is banned. You're not allowed alcohol near these things because like it will attract in entities and makes it can endanger the entire group. So like I would never trust a shamanic healer that was drinking because I know
Yeah.
what like it attracts in, and like it really does attract in like a lot of darkness on a spiritual level. And so she was just like, you know, you need to energetically protect yourself. And so when I realized, you know, I had to start saying these mantras before bed, and then everything stopped and the dreams started becoming much more manageable. But still I was being like drawn in these different directions to like, you know, connect with spirit more deeply. And I started hearing and seeing things more vividly and understanding energy slightly more. And yeah, it's just become like such a staple part of like my devotional practices of my life. Like spirit basically, you know, is the main director of my life now. And I think that's
Yeah.
why I've created what I've created, because of that.
Yeah. I was going to ask, you know, do you think that that's the foundation to you being able to create your dream life? Because, you know, there was obviously a point in this journey of sobriety for you where you decided to leave the corporate space and try your hand at coaching again. Was that spirit led?
Yeah.
Like, how did you step into that after having, you know, technically, I'm doing air quotes here, failed the first time?
Yeah, great question. So it actually wasn't spirit led that I started coaching again, but when I took it seriously, it was. So initially, I started doing a life coaching diploma actually a year before I stopped. Is that true? No, that's not true. Oh my God, I'm getting my timelines muddled up. So I have
I love it.
No, it was. Okay, that's right. Okay. Okay, no, yeah. Okay. It's all merges together sometimes. So I'd stopped drinking. And then a month later, that's right, I started doing a coaching certification with my current company. And the current company were basically like, you know, go on this coaching like journey. And it blew my mind. I learned more about myself in one coaching session than I had in 3 years of therapy. And I had weekly therapy, right? I was talking about my shit and it was just not helping. So then they helped me basically find this life coaching diploma, which I did for a year. And so I started that journey for my own healing, but then the spiritual part came in, and I remember getting a very strong message about 3 months into my sobriety of just like, you're here to do something. You're here to share something with people. And that's when I started my social media account. And, you know, I started with no followers and just posting little pictures of like laundry and just being like, laundry, the smell of fresh cotton. Crap like that.
I love
it. But I was like, you know, that's what was alive for me at the moment, was like, it was mindfulness. You know, that's ultimately what it was. I was like so enthralled by the smell of this laundry and just having this moment outside of the chaos that was my life of just being like, wow, laundry smells great. You know? I wanted to share that with people.
I get it.
And so
I totally get it.
Yeah. And then spirit did become like really from then much more alive in my business. But I kept very quiet about that for honestly about 3 years, because my dad is an atheist, and it's just not something that we talked about in our family. So I very much suppressed it and kept it to myself up until probably the last 2 years, in honesty, where I've really, you know, come out full force in the spirit, out of the spiritual closet, like, yo, this stuff's real.
I'm here. Yeah, exactly. It's life-changing, right? Yeah, that's incredible. That's incredible.
You're spiritual.
I feel like
as well, aren't you?
100%, but it was definitely something that was unlocked once I got sober, because, you know, again, I go back to that idea of like, I was just so disconnected from self, but also disconnected from the universe. And then once I removed the disconnector and I started to tune in, and, you know, I was able to remove the invisible armor that I had as this like protective force, then like spirit was able to connect in. And now, you know, I have a daily practice, you know, like you said, a devotional practice that allows me to cultivate this connection that I have with a higher power. And the more I do that, the more I live my life from this place of intuition. And, you know, that's how that in all areas of my life now, which, you know, I feel like once you step into this space, you know, it's like you can't go back, or you peek behind the curtain and it's like
100%.
Oh, okay. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
So you decided to step back into coaching, and then you started to create this space called Inner Authority. Honey, what is that? What do you actually teach people to do?
Yeah, so Inner Authority is like a part of a larger brand, which is Feminine Authority. And so Inner Authority is what I'm talking about a lot at the moment, because it's really like the soul mission. And that's the thing that I think most people, if they built Inner Authority, the outer authority becomes a hell of a lot easier to build. But essentially what I realized, and I think my biggest lessons throughout all of my pain is, you know, I've been through so much darkness actually in my life, as we've just spoken about, but I always managed to maintain this outer authority, right? So I never really allowed it to affect my career. I was always high flying. I always had a brilliant portfolio. I could always get shit done, even on a hangover. I was very driven on the outer side. And I think a big part of that was like, I really wanted like approval from, you know, my father, but also other people. I just wanted to be seen as successful. So I had a lot of outer authority, and a lot of people would say to me, gosh, you've done so well with your career. Like I had a portfolio 3 years out of university that people were passing around, you know, different agencies were passing around being like, this is the example portfolio that we want to come and work for us, you know, because I couldn't work for everyone. And so a lot of people were just like, gosh, you've really got it all together. Like on the outside, I had it all. As you hear people say it all the time, right? But no one knew that on the inside I was crumbling in the way that I was. Like no one understood. And these two things are intrinsically linked. And what I've noticed over time is like, if people build a sense of outer authority without having authentic inner authority, at some stage something crumbles, something breaks. And that's not to scare people. It's just this, it's almost a spiritual law of like, if you aren't living authentically, it's going to feel hard. Like it's going to feel 10 times harder than it has to. And at some stage, your spiritual journey here will be to heal that. And so that's where the break tends to happen. versus when you build up your inner authority. And your inner authority is made up of a range of different things. We also don't just have a blanket level inner authority. We have inner authority that is for every single part of our lives, for every single dynamic that we experience. We have a different inner authority level that we want to like go into. But your inner authority is made up of your level of resilience to be able to hold pain and get back up again. It's holds your level of conviction for what it is that you talk about. So if you have a business, what's your level of conviction around what it is that you speak about? Your level of authenticity, how honest are you being on a day-to-day basis, or how much are you allowing your ego to lead? It actually comes into a range of different areas. Your persistence, like when we come into business, it's all of the things that allow you to do the outer authority. So if you're posting on your social media, but you feel anxious, you feel overwhelmed, you're worried if people are going to judge you, those sabotaging patterns are all inner authority, And so when people come into the online space, a lot of the time, they need to build a huge amount of inner authority in a load of areas that they've never had to build inner authority before. They've built inner authority in a corporate career. So a lot of people come in and be like, gosh, I'm this really high-flying corporate person, but it comes to online business and I can't get my shit together and I feel like an imposter even though I've got all this experience. It's because it's two different areas, so it's like, it's not blanket statement. People think, oh, I've got my mindset is, this is my mindset. It's like, no, your mindset is like, it's everywhere, and it's all different dynamics. And that's where your inner authority is. It's like matching the authority that you have on the inside with the authority that you have on the outside. And that then leads to, it's a manifestation journey in itself. It leads to aligned action, which leads to being able to manifest things faster. And, the term actually authority, it comes from the word auctor, which is a Latin word for author, which is just about like creativity. So this is why in human design, your authority is how you make decisions. Spiritual authority is typically your inner power. So like authority is often, people think of like, men with like police batons, like, command and control. But actually, when you get down to like the essence of the word, inner authority just means inner power. It's inner resilience, it's inner authenticity, it's your connection to yourself. And I see it now that, in the spiritual term, I see it like a channel, so it's basically your inner authority is your channel. And if your channel is clogged with ego, how can you take aligned action? How can you be, living the path of spirit? How can you be on God's path when your ego is just, well, we should do this. No, this is what this person wants us to do. None of that's coming from spirit. None of that's coming from the creator. And so in order for us to build something that is in alignment, we need to clear out the vessel. We need to become a hollow bone, as the shamanic paths say. We need to become a clear channel so that source and spirit can come straight through us and give us aligned action every single day so that it just happens. This is why a lot of spiritual teachers, their manifestations just happen like this, because they're not pushing it. They're not doing like I should do this. It's just showing up. That's not to say they don't work hard, and they have a level of persistence, again, inner authority, persistence to keep on going because they trust that it's going to work even if they can't see the evidence of it, because they're on that divine path. And so that's really what inner authority is all about. And when I started building my inner authority, especially in relationship to money, I went from chronically 20K in debt consistently, could never save above $1,000, always ended up like random bills coming in or huge spending things. I'd always get back to 20K Aussie in debt. And now, I'm a millionaire. Like I own a multi-million dollar home. I, own a 7-figure business. The majority of that is because I have expanded my vessel. I have expanded my channel to hold all of these other things. I've expanded it to hold everything that money brings. I've developed the resilience and the inner authority and the inner power to not sabotage myself when I create that amount of success. Obviously, that is then sandwiched on top of outer authority. So your outer authority is like the marketing that you have, it's the way that you are communicating, it's your collateral, it's your brand. But when you have the inner authority, it's authentic, that will by nature funnel into the outer authority and make that more potent as well. So it allows you need both of these things to succeed. But like it's the both that come together that really create magic, is what I found. And that's kind of been like, in different instances, it's always brought me back to this core ideology of like inner authority.
I love it. I love it so much. And I think we live in a world now more than ever where people are flooded with choice. And what I see happening more now than ever is people are drawn to authenticity. So if you're cultivating that from within, it's naturally going to flow out into your messaging, your marketing. You're going to be the person that people want to work with because they can feel the authenticity and the integrity behind what you're doing. It just makes perfect sense to me. So then if somebody's listening along today and they're like, well, how do I do that aside from working with you? But what are some tools? Has it been meditation? Has it been breath work? Has it been therapy? All of it. What do you think of those key components?
Yeah, I've done a lot of experimenting over the year. And I will say that because I have a background of trauma, I also have ADHD, I should say. So my brain is naturally a little bit more chaotic than some people. So I found talk therapy never worked for me because my nervous system is so active from a lot of the trauma. And that, if you have an experience with PTSD, trauma, even if it's small t trauma, but you just, see PTSD and stuff like that, it means that your nervous system's wired different to some people. So that's why if you've ever felt like, I just can't sit still in a meditation, I just, this talk therapy is not working for me, it's because the modality that you're meant to be using has to include the body. It has to include the body. And because your nervous system is your body, it's 99% in your body, it's not in your head. And so the only things that I have found to work have been somatic work. Somatic work was hugely powerful when I put in movement and combined, visualization with movement, with actual expression, vocally expressing how I'm feeling, allowing myself to feel safety with experiencing emotions. And, I've done shamanic work as well, which I've found very, very powerful and informs some of the practices that I do. But the thing that now really ties everything together is breath work. And, I've only really discovered and started incorporating the breath in the past sort of 6 months. Before that, EFT was actually really great as well, because again, it's somatic. You're literally tapping on meridian points. So I shifted a lot of things through just somatic work and EFT. But what I also found though was that it was quite hard to sometimes, it took me a while to get into the state where I was open enough to purge the stuff from my body with somatic work. Breath work is the solution to that. And so what I've now created is these, I call them inner authority flows. And they're these flows that combine a couple of different practices, which is designed, I'm all about speed with ADHD. So I'm like, what's the fastest way I can remove this block? What's the fastest way that I can shift something if there's something? And I have often found if I have a feeling and I have intention with that feeling, I can shift that feeling. So I've created these flows that are part breath work, part somatics, and then part also connection to spirit as well. And those are the things. I have a load of recordings of them. I have something called Inner Authority Manifestation School, which it's under the guise of manifestation, but essentially it's just all of this building your inner authority, that have a lot of these flows. They're called inner flows. And they basically come together to help someone to shift a feeling very quickly. But the basis of it really is breath, because, as we have just been fully learning about and submerging it just literally allows you to take the thinking mind off. And it's plugging straight into the nervous system, and you can get in there in 5 minutes. And there is nothing that rivals that. And so this is why even old shamanic practices and stuff, they always start with the breath. There's shamanic breath flows. That's how they connect to spirit. That's how they go on these remote viewing journeys, because they start with the breath. It's called the breath of God for a reason, because it allows you to literally connect to God through your own body. So it's a combination of those things. But I'd say if anyone has been trying talk therapy or just mindset work or just shadow work, and they're like, why isn't it working for me? Somatics, breath works, somatics, move your body. It's all in your body. It will change everything. You could change your entire life in a year.
Amen to that. That is such a powerful message as we start to come to the end of this conversation, Hayley. Thank you so much for sharing. It's phenomenal. I absolutely adore you and the work that you do. There's one final question that I would love to ask you before we wrap up this conversation today. Hayley, what are your 3 non-negotiables for living an authentic and fulfilled life?
Okay, number 1 is my devotional practice. I can immediately see, which involves having a cacao every single morning. I've actually got mine now. And, you know, this is actually a little manifestation trick. Liquid carries intention, and it can literally change the liquid in our body. So I will literally speak in my affirmations and my intentions every single day into my cacao. And then when you drink it, it will literally raise your vibration as you're drinking it, because it's interacting with the water already in your body. So cacao, breathwork, non-negotiable, journaling, tarot, that's my devotional practice. It always brings me back to authenticity. That's one thing. The second thing is super basic, but it's water. Like if I am dehydrated, like, because I don't drink caffeine either, I'm so clean, it's unreal. If I don't have anything to hack my energy, so like if I'm starting to feel tired, if I'm starting to feel grumpy, if I'm starting to feel whatever, it's either because I'm not breathing right, or it's because I'm dehydrated. And water is just, it sounds so basic, but like, have more water. It will change your life. And it will also crack open your spiritual gifts. It's so important. So that's another one. And my last one is, it's probably having good people around me and having good, rich conversations. Like I went through a really long period of not having people to talk to. And there is, you know, there's, when you drink, shift from drinking alcohol to not, there is a period of like not knowing who your friends are because you change so much. And there was a period where I was like, is there something wrong with me? I don't really have any friends anymore. And, you know, I remember creating like a list of all the things that I wanted my friends to be, and like, you know, spiritual, willing to go deep, because I used to be told I was way too intense. You want to go so deep, you want to just talk about trauma, or you know, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me.
No, I love that.
Now I realize that there's not. And over the past, like, especially year, I have just attracted in the most soul aligned friendships. And those friendships keep me authentic. They keep me real because they allow me to be me, to be seen, to be heard, to be me, to not feel I have to whittle myself down. And so I'm not ashamed to say that if there's someone in my life that is not serving that, I do not have the capacity to hold that friendship anymore. And so I think keeping good people around me, and not, you know, not being scared to let go of a friendship if it's not serving me, has also kept me very true to my own path, to my own authenticity, to my own growth as well.
Beautiful. I love that. So we're doing devotional practice, water, and meaningful connection.
Yes.
I love it. That's perfect. Amazing. Thank you so much, honey. If people want to find you, discover you, reach out to you, where should they go?
I am at Hayley June Lloyd on Instagram, on YouTube, and I have a podcast called The Hayley Lloyd Show, which when we get a new editor, we'll be starting to post more regularly again. But I'm basically just Hayley Lloyd everywhere.
Amazing. Well, darling, I know you've got to get going, so let's wrap it up there. But I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you not only for today, but thank you for all of the beautiful energy that you have given me since we met in such a short period of time. But I feel like I've known you forever. And I know we always cry that we live in different cities because it's just like this cruel joke, but I'm sure we'll see each other soon. We'll make it happen.
Oh, we need to, honestly. It was just like when 100%. We were just hanging out on that, we literally spent 4 days together, and I was like, are you my sister? Like, are we?
Yeah. You're my soul sister. Yeah. Exactly right. And you know what? Like, to your point, to that final point, like it's rare to come by these days. So I'm incredibly grateful for you and all that you do. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Right, we'll chat soon.
This chat has been phenomenal. Thanks, Ash.
Yeah, my pleasure. Mwah.